Good morning, brethren. It's, uh, it's a joy to share the Word of God together and to also meet as family members. And most importantly, yesterday, most of us were able to meet at Ephraim's place at Spring Farm, I guess. Yeah. And we joined in the celebration of his daughter, who has turned 13 years. And it was great that most of us were able to join in that. And we just want to wish her a happy belated birthday as well. So this morning we are here to share the Word of God together so that it will help us in our journey through this earth. And today we're talking about a very important issue that affects most of us, or all of us, at some point in our life. That is the tendency to make excuses. And excuses are an excuse, according to Collins Dictionary. An excuse is a reason which you give in order to explain why something has been done or has not been done, or in order to avoid doing something. And I like the last part. So an excuse is a reason you give in order to avoid doing something. An excuse is part of our human life. It is the nature of human beings to make excuses. And so we do make excuses to avoid taking responsibility for our actions and inactions. And then we also do make excuses in order to bring someone or some situations. About 2 weeks ago, Terry and Brian did a fantastic job by outlining the list of tasks in the church for which we were to consider where we could actually serve. And until that, I have never thought there was so many activities, especially behind the scenes activities that keep the church going. And as I went through the list, I could count at least 56 individual tasks, ranging from preparing rosters to even changing posters on the notice board, and in between that, a lot of activities that we saw on that sheet that was presented to us. And so I'd like to say thank you for the good job, and then may God bless you for your dedication to the cause of God works. And this goes to Terry and Brian for that wonderful job. And so I prepared this sermon on that activity for two main reasons. And I know that as we were going through the tasks, there were some of the activities for which we wanted to take, but as we considered it, we began to make excuses as why we shouldn't take that particular activity. And so one of the reasons for this sermon is to encourage such people like myself and others to reconsider our decision, as it is not too late. I believe so. Yes, so if you want to reconsider your situation after the sermon, you can see Terry to make adjustment on that. And the other reason is also to encourage us, those who pick some tasks and are still doubting as to whether we will be able to carry that through. And so I want to begin this sermon with a quote from John C. Maxwell. He's a veteran in leadership coaching, and he said, "It is easier to move from failure to success than from excuses to success." Let me take it again. It is easier to move from failure to success than from excuses to success. What that means is that if you want to succeed, excuses are not the reasons or the there's no way we can use excuses to succeed. This implies that it is better to make a good attempt than having a good excuse. It is better to make a good attempt than to have a good excuse. You may have a good excuse, but if you don't make a good attempt, there is no way you are going to be successful. And so Jesus told a parable, and I want all of us to turn our Bibles to Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, verse 15 to 20. That illustrates excuses that people give. So let's turn our Bibles to Luke chapter 14, verse 15 to 20. And I think that's a better place for us to start our topic this morning. So Luke Luke 14, 15. And it's titled, I'm reading from the NIV version, The Parable of the Great Banquet. When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is ready.' It's now ready." But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said, "I have just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them. Please excuse me." Still another said, "I have just got married, so I can't come." So that was a story Jesus Christ gave to illustrate what we call excuses. So in that parable, and parable are usually physical ideas that we use to explain spiritual truth, and Jesus was using real case situation to explain spiritual truth about the kingdom of God. So in that parable, Jesus described a man who prepared a great banquet and invited many guests. So virtually they have been given the notice already, as how do you call it? Ephron did. So people were aware of the date, but on that particular day, so they sent the servant to go and give them or remind them of that the date was due. And then those who were invited then began to make excuses. And if you read verse 18, the first one said, "I have bought a field. I must go and see it." That's an interesting excuse. The point is, how can you buy something without even seeing it? So that is just an excuse not to go. Then another person also came. "I have bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them." This is the person, he has finished buying the thing before going to try them. So what happens if he tries them and it's not working? So just another excuse. Then still another came. "I just got married, so I can't come." That we may say, yeah, that he has a reason there for not coming. But obviously, you can see that even with that, it's not a tangible excuse, because who wouldn't want to show off with his bride or bridegroom in a party like this? So that was a good place for the bride to actually take the bridegroom to take them along to show off that yes, he has gotten married. But he gave that excuse that he can't come. So all of us, each excuse that represent a misplaced priority that kept the guests from experiencing the joy of the banquet. And many people or many great people in the Bible have made a lot of excuses. We talk of Adam. I can't go into details of these excuses, and most of them are very familiar to us. Adam making excuses as to pushing the blame on the wife. Jeremiah making excuses as to why he couldn't go to that task that has been given to him because he's young. Moses, Isaiah, and others. And thanks be to God that their excuses were not accepted. Or better still, they overcame those excuses, and today we can see them as great people that made impact in life. And so based on that, today we want to look at one of such people who made a lot of excuses as our case study this morning, so that we can learn something from that, and then if we have excuses, how we can overcome that. And so we start off, our case study that we're looking at is Moses, and we all know the story of Moses, how he was born at a time when Pharaoh was making an attempt to wipe out the population of the Jews in Egypt. And so he decided that all male child that are born are to be thrown into the Nile. And the mother did something interesting. The interesting thing about the mother is that the same Nile that people or children were being thrown into die, it is the same Nile that the mother also put the baby in. But what he did, he prepared the boy to be able to overcome those challenges. So there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from that, but not today. And so later on, he was picked by Pharaoh's daughter and raised in the Pharaoh's own backyard. Later on, he realized his identity, that he was actually a Jew, and therefore wanted to go back to his people. And then later, he had to kill somebody and then be on the run for several years, 40 years. At a point when he was tendering the sheep of his father-in-law, he came across the situation which was narrated to us just recently. Now, in that story, God came to Moses and then gave him a specific task to go and deliver the Israelites. Moses began to make excuses. And from that, up to Exodus chapter 4, we can see 5 made excuses that Moses made, but these were all not tenable. They were not accepted by God. And we want to look at these excuses and how we often make them. The first excuse comes from Exodus chapter 3, verse 11. But Moses asks God, when he has been asked to go and do or take that assignment of delivering the people from the slavery, Moses asked God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Exodus chapter 3, that was the question Moses posed to God after he was confronted. So the excuse Moses gave is that I'm not qualified. And was he qualified or unqualified? Yes, in human sense, we can say, yes, Moses was not qualified because he was not a likely candidate to go to Pharaoh. He is somebody who has killed an Egyptian and has been a fugitive for over 40 years. He was at the age of 80. Thus, he has almost passed the average age of the people of his time. And so it wasn't, from human perspective, he wasn't the right candidate to tax. But Moses, so if you were to select people for such a tax as a human being, Moses is not the likely candidate you will consider. But God said, Moses, you are the right candidate. He does not look at what we look at as human beings. So he said, I will be with you. And that should have been enough for Moses. The point is that the work will not depend on Moses, but it will depend on God. For that is, He is our sufficiency. Let's turn our Bible to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. What that talks about. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4 says, such confidence we have through Christ before God. Not that we are competent in ourselves to be claiming anything for ourselves, but our competency comes from God. So if Moses was going to be sufficient enough, that sufficiency was not going to depend on him, but was going to depend on God. And so as we are, if we are going to be competent in the work that we are going to do or we are doing, that will also depend on God. And maybe that is our situation. We tend to give excuses based on certain factors. We consider ourselves as inadequate for the job. We must remember that whenever God calls us for a task, He always provides the resources. We need to trust God on that. And so if you consider the story of Jeremiah, I just mentioned that, who responded to God's calls by saying, I do not know how to speak. I am a child. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 6. Yet God reassured him saying that, do not say, I am only a child. I will be with you and rescue you. And so that is the assurance God gave to his people for his task. And that assurance is still there today for us. For those of us who are interested in taking God's assignment, He's going to be with us. After this, I think that should have been enough for Moses, giving that assurance. But Moses came out with another excuse. Exodus chapter 3, verse 13. Then Moses asked God, if I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? So the point is, the excuse is, what should I say? I don't even know what to do. I don't have idea about the task that you are giving me. So what should I do? And the idea here is that I am not a theologian. I can't stand here and preach. I am untrained. I do not have the skills or the knowledge to be able to carry out this task that you are assigning me. God immediately gave Moses a response that says, I am. So his question is, what should I tell them? He said, I am has sent you. Exodus 3:14. That simple phrase contains the essential truth about God, that who God is. He is the personal, eternal, and self-existing God for the universe. He always was, He always is, and He will always be. So I am is a very dynamic name of God. Think of it this way. So whatever situation that you find yourself, that name I am is presented to you as a solution. So the point is, are you weak? God says, I am your strength. Are you sick? I am your healer. Are you lonely? God says, I am your friend. So that is a very dynamic name. It caters for every situation that you find yourself. Are you thirsty? I am the fountain of the living waters. So God says, I am your courage, I am your health, I am your hope, your defender, your forgiver, your joy, and then your future. And so I am the one who makes the impossible possible. You can continue on on that phrase that says I am. And so that was the power God was giving to Moses to understand the situation. In fact, God said to Moses, I'm going to be with you to do all the work. So Moses, you don't have to worry about the future. God has a plan that covers all the details. But still, Moses will come out with another excuse. This time, he's now praying with God. What if? So he's making some reasoning with God here. and thinking about the possibility of he being not accepted. So in Exodus chapter 4, verse 1, Moses asked God, what if they won't believe me and will not obey me, but say the Lord did not appear to you? So the point is that they will not believe me. Yes, it was possible that people would not even know Moses, for most of his generation might have passed, and over 40 years has passed, so the next generation of people would not even know who Moses is. He has been away for 40 years, and many of his generation, as I said, have passed away. So who will believe Moses? God knew that, so he asked Moses a question. What is it? What is in your hand? What is in your hand? That's an interesting question. Moses replied, a staff. Exodus 4:2. So we are talking about a shepherd staff. Just a walking stick, you may call it. And most shepherds do have that one to direct the sheep towards a particular direction. There was nothing special about it. So Moses has no doubt found it maybe perhaps in the wilderness. It was just a stick in the desert. God told Moses to throw that staff on the ground where it turned into a snake. And God told him to pick it up again, turning back into a wooden staff. So just God was demonstrating his presence to be with Moses in wherever he goes, like the story of Gideon, where he has to put some tricks with God to see whether really God was going to be with him. So what's the point? God will now use the ordinary to do the extraordinary. He is the one that makes the familiar strange. So just the stick was something Moses was so familiar with, but at that point, it became so strange to him. And I was just imagining how he could actually pick that to when it has turned into a snake. So what is in your hand? I think that's a good topic to talk about maybe in the future. What is in your hand? We all have something in our hand that we can bring on board to make this church what God wants it to be. There is something for everyone here to contribute his or her quota. The point is that we cannot all lead, we cannot all be song leaders, Bible class teachers, or Sunday school teachers, or preachers. But surely there's something for you. As you go through the list, as I said, at least 56 individual tasks. So we cannot make excuses, and we cannot ask, what if? What if I'm not able to lead the songs as expected? What if I get trouble speaking up with as a volunteer teacher? What if I volunteer to teach on Sunday school and the kids do not listen to me? We cannot be asking God, what if? What if is a major situation when we want to try something or do something? We always think about that. So I was just talking to Fon about how he started his idea of leading songs. So that at that point, there could be a lot of what if I stand there and I'm not able to lead. A lot of these ideas could have come to his point. And fear is one of the key things that make us to do a lot of excuses. Unless, like we said, unless we try something, there's no way we're going to be successful. So as long as we are saying what if, we are not obeying. We are only negotiating with God. That is the big difference. To obey means, oh Lord, I am ready. You say, I am ready. Now you work out all the details. Negotiating means you are saying, Lord, you work out the details and I will obey. That is the difference. So all Moses has to do was just to obey God, and the Lord will take care of the rest. Still, he was not satisfied with all this. He came out with another excuse. And that's found in Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. But Moses replied to the Lord, please, so this time around, I think he's being polite with the word, please. Lord, I have never been eloquent in the past or recently of since you have been speaking to your servant, because my mouth and my tongue are sluggish. So at that point, Moses was a bit polite, as I said. Say, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent in the past. Or even now, as I'm speaking to you, you can see that I'm stammering. Yes, we don't know the situation as some people think Moses was maybe have some speech disabilities or something of that sort. But perhaps Moses was thinking that the Lord will fix his problem if indeed he has one. God answers come in a form of question. You know, in Ghana, they say we are good at question. If you ask a Ghanaian a question, you answer you with a question. So this time around, God was trying to be a Ghanaian. So Moses asked question, and then God also asked him a question. Who placed a mouth on humans? Who makes a person mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Exodus 4:11. So Moses says, why God? Why will you choose a guy like me who has a tough time speaking to be your leader? You know how painful it is for me to speak in front of a crowd, to pronounce words correctly, to think and say just the right thing. But God says to Moses, yes, you are inadequate because I have made you that way, but your weakness is part of my plan. As he said to Paul. Let's turn our Bible to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, what God told Paul about his inadequacies. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Verse 9. So let me first of all start from verse 8. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. So Paul apparently has some challenges, and so he has pleaded to God for that to be taken away. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the same gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. And so that's the point that we are making here, that whenever we think we are weak in something, it is true that God manifests his power. And so many people, like Moses, feel that they are not good enough for the task that is set before them. Moses expressed his inadequacy by saying, I am not eloquent. So the feeling of insufficiency often stems from our comparing ourselves to others or believing that we don't have all the answers. So you cannot be as somebody who has done the thing for several years. And so you cannot compare yourself to somebody who has been doing that thing several years and still think you can do the same. But it takes courage and it takes time to be able to try out things. You may not be eloquent. That is not the issue. All that God wants is a willing heart that is ready for action. If you are willing to serve God in any capacity, he is ready to help us. We may not be talented or skillful in a particular ministry here in the church, like leading the Lord's Supper, teaching Sunday school, leading song, but if we are willing, we can be equipped. So, at this point, I would like to acknowledge and cite examples like Fawn that I've already indicated, and some of our ladies here, like Juvie, Vivian, Janet, Fortune, who have shown willingness to be trained for the Sunday school, and many others who are also doing good job in that sense, and our trainers as well. And so that goes to Les and that's on teaching and preaching. Then also to Brian for helping in the song direction, and then those who have already helped in training others, like I'm just trying to recollect the name, Terry and Magis. They have helped in one way or the other and continue to support, to equip others to be able to carry on the work that we have been tasked to do. And then finally, Moses comes out with a final excuse, which perhaps may not be an excuse, but let's see. Moses said, "Please, Lord, send someone else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. So he made a lot of excuses trying to escape the task God has assigned to him. After all those excuses were provided with valid answers, he said finally, revealing his true motive why he was making that excuses. So that is the heart of the problem. Someone has said, excuses are lies wrapped up with reasons. So all the excuses that Moses was making was up to one reason, and all in the fact that he didn't want to take or undertake that assignment. And so behind most of the excuses that we make is the lies that says we are not ready for the task. So the question is, did you ever or have you ever said that? Let someone else do it? Or did that even cross your mind when you were thinking about a task? You say, oh, this one, I think I'm not qualified. Maybe someone is better at doing that. In such a time like this, when most of the people have, in such a time like this, when most people have ensured that the church continue to this time, are getting weaker and some are retiring, like less in about a month. Yeah, I guess so. Will be retiring. It is time for you and me to eschew all forms of excuses and take the charge of the church activities. There are so many tasks to be done here for which all of us can assist in one way or the other. No matter your age, and for the children here, you can all help. And I like, what's her name? I'm trying to recollect the Master's young daughter. Anytime we close from church, you see her holiday carrying some of the chairs. So all the children here, we are all up to the task. There are a lot of things. Don't go out praying immediately after we've closed from Sunday service. Help in arranging the place. There are some things you can all do. So no matter your age, your background, or situation, God can still use us to bring glory to his name if we do not allow excuses to cloud our vision. No excuse, therefore, is tenable in the sight of God. And so, but I must admit that we are all doing our best and we can still do better. May God bless us to continue what we are doing and not be distracted by excuses.